that I want to share with you. First of all, let me just tell you a little bit about myself. My name is David DeJong, and I'm the director of the Pima-Maricopa Irrigation Project for the Gila River Indian community. I've been with the community 23 years. I've been with the project now 18 years. The last 12, I'll enter 13 on Memorial Day as the director of the project. And it has been, for me, it has been the fulfillment of a lifetime. And I don't mean any offense here. I will never understand the culture of the Yakima or the Peepash or any other Native peoples. I'm not Native American. But I have spent my entire life, literally since I was 16 years old, when I first drove across the Gila River Indian community, and I recognized all this land that obviously had been farmed before. And in my mind I said, I want to know what happened here. Something happened, and it was pretty dramatic because land, thousands and thousands of acres, are lying fallow. And I committed my life at that point to understanding the other side of the story to the extent I could. And so I have spent now 35 years researching and writing on the history of the community. And what the community is doing now is really incredible. As the Yakima, the river people, the river has to be a part of the current day community. So I want to share a little bit about what the community is doing with restoring the river. And it's in small parts. We just started this a few years ago, but I think you will enjoy. And the very last slide that I have is going to show you what we are beginning construction on in May, and we'll have completed by the end of the year. First of all, this is the Oldberg Dam Underground Storage Facility. That's our technical term, but we all just call it MAR 5. MAR meaning Managed Aquifer Recharge Site number 5. 5 implies that there's more than 5, or more than at least 5, and there are 14 sites we've identified, and we now have 2 completed. I'm going to focus on the one that is in operation. The other one we just completed literally 3 weeks ago. This is, for those of you that are familiar with the community, if you know where Oldberg Bridge is, this is just to the west of Oldberg Bridge. This is where we put the first recharge facility in. Okay, what's the trick? There we go. There we go. Well, part of the mission of the Pima-Maricopa Irrigation Project, and again, that's where I'm involved with the community as the director of this project, but part of our mission is to create, recharge, and restore a flowing Gila River with all of its natural flora and fauna. The community back in 1985, the community leadership had the foresight to put together a document. It's called the Master Plan for Land and Water Resources. And in that document, the community identified 17 areas, not specific areas, but identified a goal of establishing 17 areas where they would restore the river. Because if you know anything about the Gila River, you know after the damming, particularly of Coolidge Dam in the 1920s, the Gila River ceased to flow. Other than short ephemeral flood flows, outside of course the 1983, 1993 floods, which were huge floods, and the river flowed for quite some time. But for the most part, the river stopped flowing. With it, a lot of the flora and fauna along the river disappeared, with maybe some exceptions on the west end, and I know Charles Enos is going to talk about that a little bit later. But on the eastern part of the community, what once looked like this became a very desolate, barren spot in central Arizona. Well, our beginnings in 2011, in fact, Anne-Marie Chisella was still with the Office of Water Rights at the time, and we worked with Anne-Marie as well as others in the law office, and we began to look across the community, where would it make sense to establish either riparian areas or recharge sites. The goal was, if possible, to combine the two. Recharge, because we're storing water underground for future use, and there are other benefits that come with it. But at the same time, we can restore the riparian canopy along the river, or at least portions of the river. And we identified, as I mentioned, 14 of those sites, and MAR 5 was one of them. Well, in 2015, the Community Council adopted a comprehensive water management plan that had three primary objectives. One, the long-term viability of water use. Gila River Indian community, the Pima-Maricopa in particular, Peeposh to a lesser degree, have always been an agricultural people. Surprises a lot of people to know that in the 1860s, the community, the Pima-Maricopa, were farming 15,000 acres of land. That's a lot of land. Whether it be 1860 or whether it be today, that's a lot of land. Well, obviously the people, as long-term farmers, long-time farmers, millennia, going back millennia, the loss of water had a significant impact, not only on the culture of the people, loss of an agricultural economy, but what it did to the river in terms of cultural and spiritual matters. Well, the goal was to restore the long-term viability of water use by storing water underground for the future agricultural economy of the community. Also to provide a hedge against the rising CAP water cost. The community has an executed water settlement, as I think all of you know, under the Arizona Water Settlements Act of 2004. And in that, the community became the single largest contractor of CAP water. But the community still has to pay for that CAP water. That's expensive water. Right now, the United States pays all of the OM&R costs of that water, but the community has to pay for the energy charges to get the water to the community. That is running around $70 an acre foot. That's expensive water, especially when Gila River water is free. So by storing water underground, this could be a hedge against rising CAP costs, because nobody anticipated when the water settlement took place that the cost of CAP water would rise so rapidly. Thirdly, and this was a major goal, was to restore flows in the Gila River. And again, as the Pima-Maricopa, as the word implies, the river people, you have to have a flowing river to have a vibrant culture that's tied to that river. So why recharge? Well, these managed aquifer recharge sites enables the community to do several things. Number one, to store water underground for use during surface water shortages. We know the continuing drought. We are in a historic drought now, 20 plus years. As this drought continues, Anne-Marie alluded to the climate change that's occurring. We know the droughts are probably going to continue. They might be exacerbated in coming years. By storing water underground in the future when surface water is short, whether it be Gila River surface water or surface water off the Colorado River, the community will have water stored underground to sustain its agricultural economy. To date, the community has stored, not at MAR 5, but in other places, the community has now stored in excess of 1 million acre feet of water for future use. Secondly, to ensure a safe yield of groundwater use. That's important because we have modeled as part of the irrigation project when the community extracts groundwater for use, whether it be for agriculture, which is the primary use, or other uses, it's going to have an impact on that groundwater table. Historically, that water table was very high until early in the 20th century when groundwater wells went in all around the community. That brought the water table down very low. Today, most groundwater in the community is in excess of 100. Some places it's 200 or 300 feet down below the surface. By restoring water into the underground, we can sustain the withdrawal of groundwater pumping for agriculture today and into the future. Again, we've modeled this. We know exactly how, well, I'm not going to say exactly, but we know within reason how much water we can extract on an annual basis and have it be a sustainable withdrawal of water, meaning as we pump water out of the ground, water is being restored to the ground through natural forces and through recharge. Thirdly, to enjoy a flowing river and the return of a riverine ecosystem, a very important goal, and one that I've been amazed at what Charles has done out in the Peeposh wetlands, just recently learning more about it as part of the MAR 5. We have a number of people in this room that have been participating in the development of this MAR 5 interpretive center that we are constructing, which I'll show you here in just a few moments. But we wanted as a goal to restore the river and all that goes with the river, the flora, the fauna, etc. And then fourthly, for the community, a goal is also to generate marketable long-term storage credits. The site is a permitted site through the Arizona Department of Water Resources, so it gives the community flexibility. If it chooses to, it can market those water credits, use the funds to expand other sites, again, if that's what the community chooses to do. Well, this is March of 2013, and what I want you to focus on is the area right here. Oldberg Dam is on the right side of the screen there. This is what the Mar site looked like in March of 2013 before we did anything. Now you see, yes, there are some areas, especially right west of Oldberg Bridge, where there was a leaking gate in the old canal, so it enabled this little riparian area to survive. There were a number of willow trees there. But this is what it looked like. And then we started construction on the Mar 5 site in the winter of 2014-15. The site was permitted under a pilot permit through ADWR, and the first water came on August 28, 2015. And you can see our channel is right here. We constructed an irrigation ditch, and we just simply dumped the water into the river, having a pretty good idea of what was going to happen once the water went into the river. We were going to see an explosion of growth. What we saw surpassed what we thought was going to happen. Again, the community had a pilot permit through ADWR. It was only for a 2-year period, because this was the first recharge site in the community. This was the first site of recharging and restoring the river. We weren't exactly sure how everything was going to work, so we said, let's go for a pilot permit, and then that'll give us some data that we can work with, and then we can go after a long-term permit. That long-term permit was just signed this month. The community now has a 10-year permit to recharge 200,000 acre-feet of water at this site. Again, this is in that same time period. This is in August of 2015, so you see the water is being put into the river, coming through this channel, and it, for the most part, hugged the south bank and went west, which is what we thought. Some of it went to the east, a little bit went to the north just for a short distance, but it was uphill, so that water eventually came back. Well, after a year, we realized, in fact, after about 4 weeks, the water channelized and everything went west. We wanted to get greater wetted perimeter, so we put our heads together and said, how do we get more water out into the river to get greater percolation, greater riparian enhancement? And we came up with this idea of putting in a distribution box. This was the box as it was under construction, and all this simply does is, now at the end of this canal, we have 3 gates. We can send water west, north, and east, which enables us to split the water and put it in. We have it in probably 7 or 8 braids of the river right now. And what this has allowed is for a tremendous amount of vegetation to grow, and we're able to restore or recharge, that is, a lot of water into the ground. The last aerial photo that we took was in April of last year, so this is about a year old. This photo, this is to the south. This is the distribution box, and you can see we got water going multiple braids here. We cut a channel through this huge sandbar. We were outside of a jurisdictional water, just for the record, and put it in multiple channels up here to the north. And then to the east, we have this area where it ponds up almost 4 feet deep along the east before, on the far northeast corner off of this screen, it finally crests, and then it goes down into the low flow channel of the river itself, where we have 2 more braids. So again, we have about 6, 7, 8 braids of the river. Now look at the difference between 2013, the earlier photo, and this one taken 4 years later, almost 4 years to the date, in fact. This has been a tremendous success. We've had a lot of vegetation. DEQ just recently planted, I'm guessing, about 30 cottonwood trees, and that's just the start. This has been such a success that we have taken, in fact, a couple of weeks ago, I had the privilege of taking the new Commissioner for Reclamation, Brenda Berman, out here, took her on site, gave her the whole show on the recharge and what the community's doing, talked about the other recharge site that we are completing, that now is complete. We've taken congressmen out here, we've had people from out of the Bureau of Reclamation, Department of Interior, we had the Assistant Secretary for the Interior come out a couple of years ago. It has become a tremendous attraction for the community and for the community members. Now this just shows you under that temporary permit for these 2 years, and then these 2 years here where the community was just recharging water, non-permitted, just putting water in the ground to keep the vegetation alive. But to date, we have about 19,000 acre-feet of water that we've recharged at this site. Now, because of all of that interest that has been generated, Governor Lewis, and this has been, water issues have been a priority with Governor Lewis from the day he stepped into office a little over 3 years ago, 2015. In fact, his very first action as governor, the very first day, was to declare 2015 the year of the water settlement. And it was an official proclamation. Governor Lewis has been instrumental in every aspect of water development in the community since he took office. Well, because of all of the interest that's been generated here at the Mar site, this is just for perspective, this is the channel that I showed you, this is where the distribution box is. We send water west, north, and east. A number of months ago, the governor came to me and said, I want you to develop an interpretive trail center. In fact, we came here, some of you in the room were part of that group. We came here to the Audubon Society. We looked at all of your trails, and if I'm not mistaken, it was in like August or September of last year. And then we went and visited some other sites in Gilbert and some other areas. And we tried to generate some ideas about what could the community do to make this an educational facility. And that's a critical part of it. And we ended up coming up with this concept. We brought a group of people, not only from Pima-Maricopa Irrigation Project, but from DEQ. We brought in some tribal elders. We had tribal members. Robert here from the Cultural Center, Hohokam Heritage Center. Charles was part of that. I know others, other people that were part of that group. We had a pretty good-sized group of people getting input as to what this facility should be, how it should be tailored, and what it should be like. Governor Lewis was part of that. Every time we met, the governor wanted an update. Where are we at? How is it coming along? And this was the ultimate concept that we devised as phase one that we just executed a contract on Monday. The design has started. We start construction in May. And the intent here is there's almost a mile of trails. We'll have a parking spot over here with an open space. We've got a ramada, and a ramada. This is a 3/4 of a mile of trail here. 3,000 trees, plants, bushes, all of which are native to this area, are being planted. Some of them are being grown right now. The intent is this will be this area to the west will be for community members only, where they can go down into the river, harvest the materials that are needed for baskets, for instance. All along the trail system, you'll notice there's a big node here in the middle where we envision taking school kids to teach them about the native flora and fauna, as well as the water settlement, as well as irrigation, as well as agricultural history. All along here, there are places where you can head off and be a little bit secluded, where we envision elders perhaps sharing stories, sharing about the culture, sharing about the history. This area here in the far north is going to be kind of the capstone. It's going to look something like this. If you look at this plan view here, plan view here on the top, the trail will come around in a circular movement with trees planted all around. It'll be an elevated area, and the intent is people will be able to look downstream at all of the flora and fauna that's being developed and being introduced, coming in natural or being planted in the case of the flora. Look to the north to the Santan Mountains, look to the south to the Sackatoon Mountains, and even though Oldberg Bridge is here to the east, be able to look upstream and get a 360-degree panoramic view of that particular area of the community. This is going to be a spectacular facility. We are relying very heavily on the Hoogam Heritage Center. Robert has been spearheading the process by which we're going to put signage in, labeling not only the plants, but also the history of agriculture, the history of irrigation, to educate the community broadly on not only the MAR 5 site, but the water settlement in total. Completion is scheduled just before Thanksgiving, and that's an important date because on December 10, we will have the 14th annual Water Settlement Day celebration. And this year the governor wants to hold it out here at the MAR 5 site. So we are on fast track to have this completed. Interpretive trail will provide opportunities for, one, recreating the diverse flora and fauna of the river. We've already seen a lot of these native plants come back naturally, putting water on the ground. The seeds that were buried for perhaps a century or more are coming back. We're seeing wildlife come back in. I'm not sure who from the Audubon Society, but I know some people from the Audubon Society came out there a number of months ago and already identified 25 different bird species. It's coming back. To understand the cultural importance of the Gila River and its flora and fauna, as well as the Arizona Water Settlement Act and the Pima-Maricopa Irrigation Project, to be an educational institution, if you will. And then thirdly, to educate community youth in fields of agriculture and water management. The community, as part of the water settlement, we still say the community has the largest water settlement in North American history at 653,500 acre-feet of water. Yes, there are other tribes that have larger amounts of water, like the Crow settlement, which was 800,000 acre-feet, but a good portion of that water, about 40%, went to non-Indians who own land within the Crow irrigation, within the Crow reservation. So they were part of that water settlement. So in terms of true tribal water, we believe Gila River still has the largest water settlement. We want to educate community youth in that aspect, that the water settlement really is only a beginning. I think anybody that's been involved in a water settlement, you realize the actual execution of the act itself is only the beginning. Sometimes we look at it and say, we finally achieved it, it's over. It's not. For the community, it's only the beginning. Community will always have to fight to hold on to that water. We already know Upper Valley cities are doing, or farmers, irrigation districts are doing everything they can to try to take that water back. So our intent here is to educate community youth in in the fields of agriculture and water management and become stewards of the land, stewards of the water. Thank you very much.
Thank you, David. And I can, are we doing questions right now for each panelist or at the end? We have any questions? We'll just go ahead and take questions because we actually have 4 folks, and then anybody have any questions for David? Any questions?
David, can you talk about the other restoration areas that are planned or recharge areas? Good question.
The second site we just completed. It has not yet been permitted, but we can now deliver water to is on the far east end of the community in the Blackwater area. And we're working on a permit that we anticipate will be finalized probably in August, maybe September of this year for another 200,000 acre-feet over a 10-year period of time. Those will be the first, that'll be the second permitted area. MAR 5 is the first permitted area. We've already identified what will be the third site. The third site will be in District 5. It's not finalized. In fact, it's being presented to council this morning in an executive meeting. And that would be just west of Interstate 10, just north of Nelson Road, for those of you that are familiar with that area. But again, we've identified 14 different sites. We have probably 2 more sites in District 1 on the east end of the community. I think we have 2 sites in District 2. We have 2 sites, possibly 3 sites in District 4. We have another site, this one is in District 3. We have another potential site in District 3, and then there's maybe 5 of them in District 5. We are not looking to have any recharge sites in District 6 or 7, simply because District 6 and 7, on the west end of the community, you have the Estrella Mountains on the south or the west, and Salt River Mountains that are on the, kind of to the north or to the east. And the river is actually squeezed at that point, so there's a very high water table there already, which is feeding and enabling the Peepash wetlands or the Gila wetlands to remain. So we're not looking at any recharge sites on the far west end of the community. Everything is in Districts 1 through 5.
So, yeah.
I just have a question related to funding. Was this completely funded by the community, or did you secure grant funding? It seems really fast, so.
Yes. All right, the question was about funding. Is this being funded with tribal dollars or grant funds or other? This is all being funded through the community's master repayment contract with the Bureau of Reclamation. We met with Reclamation. Reclamation has agreed that recharge is a very valid, beneficial use of water. So we are using the community's master repayment contract, which is funding the construction of the irrigation system, and we're just simply providing outlets to the river, and we're constructing it with BOR funds.
You guys, so far, have you guys noticed any significant increase in the groundwater levels? The well sounding or anything like that?
Good question, again, for everybody. Have we seen any increase in the groundwater table? We don't want to see too rapid of an increase, because then that means we have only minimal storage capability. But we have seen the water table. We have monitoring wells. As part of these sites being permitted with ADWR, we have to have monitoring wells so we know exactly what's happening with the water table. And we do know that the water table, the 20,000 acre feet that we've recharged already, the water table has come up about 3 feet. So we anticipate when we start putting 20,000 acre feet in, which we're doing this year, water table is probably going to come up 5 to 8 feet. But there's a slow western gradient. That water, even though the river is not flowing on the surface, there still is a subsurface river that's flowing. As we're recharging into the river, that water's percolating down. There's a slow gradient that's heading to the west, northwest. And based on the hydrogeologists that we're working with, we believe MAR 5 and the MAR 1B site in Blackwater, District 1, we can easily put 200,000 acre feet over a 10-year period. The model is indicating that water maybe comes up 20, 25 feet at the most. And that's important because there are a lot of sand and gravel operations we don't want to interfere with. ADWR takes those very seriously, so we have to be very careful that we don't put too much water or raise the water table too rapidly that we start inundating these sand and gravel operations. But thus far, we've seen about a 3-foot rise in right at the recharge site itself. Of course, there's a mounding of water. When you put water in the ground, right at the point of discharge is where the water table is going to be the highest, and then it slowly tapers off in all directions.
What is your depth to groundwater up there?
At the MAR 5 site, our depth of groundwater is about 81 feet. In fact, it's 81, I don't know exactly, but it's 81 point something.
This might be a Charles question, but you're doing the work of beavers with your big new concrete thing. I was wondering if beavers were natural to this system, or are they going to be brought in at one time to help with your whole system?
I would probably defer to Charles on that. I don't think the intent at the MAR sites is to bring beavers in, but that is a decision.
We got plenty of beavers, not peapods, so.
Oh, okay.
Our farm needs beavers.
You'll transport them, I'm sure.
I'm just saying, if you build a big concrete thing, that's the work of beavers right there, you know.
Well, that is a very valid question because we know historically the Gila River was loaded with beaver. They were all throughout the Gila River. All of the western streams had beavers in them. And they were important for the environment. As beavers built